Hi everybody. Welcome today to class in a flipped environment as we kind of explore different pedagogical approaches, especially as they pertain to using technology. And so my decision to go flip today was really because I feel like this is content that really lends itself well to this pedagogical approach. So my goal here is really twofold. One, to provide you with some information, really background information about copyright and how that impacts you as a future teacher. And then two, give you an experience of using a flipped classroom concept as a pedagogical approach for the classroom. So as you participate in this experience, kind of keep that in mind. And also keep in mind, you might already have a little bit of a pushback and say, well, I'll never do this in an elementary classroom. Well, we'll talk about that a little bit. And so I think that's a part of class today that you really want to kind of consider is, what are the pros and cons associated with using an approach like this with younger students, because yes, it is being done, and how might that affect you as you enter classrooms in a few years. Okay, so our questions for today are threefold here. The first part, so you'll see in your folder on Blackboard that I kind of have this split into three parts, and each of the three parts are going to address one of these questions. So the first one is, why should you really be concerned about copyright? So I want to discuss that, provide you with a little bit of background, and then kind of let you move forward in learning about some of the things as fair use related to materials that you'll use in your classroom and so forth. So that's the focus of part 2, the second question about what is meant about fair use and how that relates to what we do in classrooms. And then third is going to be a little bit about fair use criteria. I'll talk about that in video 2, but you'll apply it in part 3. Okay, so I'll get started with part 1, and that is, what do you think you already know about copyright and how it's used and how you've experienced it as a learner and maybe in a practicum experience or working with teachers or whatever. So that's one of the reasons that you kind of took a pretest before you started the class today, in order to understand, or for me to understand kind of where you started and now where you will end as you finish up this flipped experience. I think it's really interesting that I think probably individually we think we already know a lot about copyright because we're already into how we take images from the internet or how we use text from a textbook. And I guess my goal is to offer you just a little bit more information to clarify that, especially as future teachers moving forward. Okay, so I'm going to start with a comic, and what I want to say first is, yes, I have used this. I did borrow it from a web page and so forth, but according to copyright, I can use one comic from a collection, a book, or whatever. So I am following copyright. But I just want you to kind of soak this comic in just a little bit in terms of how students perceive this today. And I think the perception from a lot of young people, K-12, is that whatever's on the internet is fair game. I can use it, it's there, somebody's put it there, and maybe it's not that it's because it's there, but it's so easy to take. It's so easy to copy and paste text into my paper. It's so easy to click and drag an image to a paper. So I think that's the mentality that we have to be really, really careful about. So as this comic says, well, it's okay to take it from the internet, so it must be okay to copy a friend's test. Even, we have had instances in 201 and other classes in our teacher ed program where students copy assignments. And I don't know why people think that's ethical nor okay, but it happens. And so I think in terms of my goal for you, especially as we start this in 201, is that you really embrace the idea of being a teacher who will follow copyright and who will model it for his or her students. So kind of keep this in mind, and not to be light with it, because it is a very serious kind of situation, but I think we have to kind of think about it as we move forward and how we think about copyright and how it's done in classrooms. The other thing that I want to point out is, I think this is an interesting research paper that was published, and it's an excerpt that I've shown you here, and Anderson here, even though it's done several years ago, talks about how teachers really focus this research on teachers, how they lack an understanding of fair use, and where this author says hinders students' learning and really sets a bad example. And so if you just read this, you can if you Google this, you'll find it on the internet and you can read the whole article. But in terms of how Anderson sets this up, is teachers fall into these three categories. One is see no evil. And that one I think is very, very dangerous. And I'm hoping that Iowa State students would never take this lens in terms of copyright. But they simply refuse to educate themselves on copyright. And so I'm going to say that's not going to happen to us, because we're trying to build this into our program and things, and especially with this experience in 201. So you are educating yourselves about copyright and how this would work. But it's really that understanding that, it can't be wrong if I don't know it's wrong. And I will say that I think my age of educators, 30 years ago, 25 years ago, I think there were a lot of us that fell into this category. We really weren't even taught about copyright, but technology was different 30 years ago. And so we didn't think anything was wrong. Okay. The second group is close the door. Again, I think this is another dangerous one. This is the group of educators who they know about copyright. They kind of understand fair use, but it's easy for them to close their door to their classroom and say, it's okay. I'm just going to do this because nobody's going to see me do it. And I think that's dangerous too. The third one is hyper comply. This is the group that I think they're trying to understand copyright and fair use. They're doing it, but they're a little bit haphazard, and they perceive that they understand the law, but they don't actually do it in their actions in the classroom. And so I just think these are kind of interesting takes on what a researcher has found out about teachers and their approach. So really, I guess my goal again is I don't want you to fall into any of these groups, but know that they're out there. I've talked about a little bit as we enter copyright. One thing, as you have experiences with actual K-12 teachers or pre-K teachers out in the field, and they're not now after this following copyright, I think we want to bring it to their attention. But remember, you guys, I don't think we are the police of this. I think it's what we need to do is educate ourselves to enact it in an ethical manner, and then we move on from there. I think we, again, when we're guests in others' classrooms, I think we need to be careful with that. But I think we can also bring it up for discussion as well. So why is this literally important to you? Number one, you guys, it's the law, okay? It's a federal law. Copyright is written as a law, and we we need to follow it. We need to obey it. So just keep that in mind as we move forward. Number two, obeying copyright. This is where it's important for me. Obviously, it's the law, but the next level is I just think it's an ethical necessity for teachers. We, I hope, are preparing ethical educators at Iowa State. And so this is a part of the package that you develop as you move through your preparation program. And then I would just hope you would take, like, the stance, this is an ethical thing that I must do as an educator. The last one is this is almost tiered. It's a law, it's an ethical necessity, but you guys, it's the right thing to do, right? As we get into our classrooms and do things with students, it's just what we need to do. It's the right thing to do. So there are early lessons on copyright that in the article that hopefully you read before you're watching the video, copyright laws are subject to change, and they can change at any time. But the existing copyright law that we're on now, it's really all about an interpretation that was done on a case with the Supreme Court about home recording on VCRs. You guys are so young, you probably don't even remember VCRs, but when people were just recording movies and everything to tape, movie companies, TV producers, they went ballistic because people were recording their movies, people were watching them, showing them with friends, and they were losing revenue, okay? But the Supreme Court, 5-4, said, no, they can do that because of this. So read about that case. There's a little bit about it in the reading, but it's an interesting outcome because just think if that would have been tweaked. One way Supreme Court judges changed the vote one time, what would have happened in terms of how we use technology today? So keep in mind that Congress can change copyright rules at any time and has done so frequently. They tweak it. We always seem to be in this little gray area here and there, okay? So what I'm going to try to do is give you, this is where we are right now in understanding this. But, in your 20, 30, 35 career tenure as an educator, it's going to change maybe because everything's going to change. The game's going to change. So keep in mind that this is part of your professional development as you move forward. So I'm going to leave you kind of with this at part one, leave you with this quote because I think it kind of sums up where we are. Copyright in general is all about respect for intellectual property, and that's what we'll learn about in part 2 here in just a minute. But all educators who deal with technology need to understand the legal and illegal uses of intellectual property. If a school hopes to keep free of copyright lawsuits, because that literally can happen, we'll talk about that a little bit, and I think this is what's important. You guys, all I want you to do really is be ethical models for students to emulate. So if you're using it and sharing, okay, this is why I'm only using this and why, then students will emulate it as well. Okay? So what I'll do is I will sign off of part 1, and now you'll move into, when you want to, part 2, and what I'll deal with there, what I'll talk about there, will be your ideas on or share with you about fair use and how that works. Okay? See you in part 2.